Happy Friday. I'm sitting here with my tea and my fuzzy blanket trying to be cozy. It's a cold day for where I live and we don't get them very often, so I always try to cuddle up when we do. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to have a question and answer session. Over the past few months, there have been some really amazing questions that have come in that people have asked me. And so I thought it would be nice to take a chance on this chilly day to go through some of those questions. So grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee or whatever you drink and snuggle up. I do want to thank those of you who have sent questions in. They're really good questions. I think this is going to be a fun episode. It feels just kind of laid back, like we're hanging out having a conversation as friends. So if you do think of any other additional questions that you would like for me to answer during the course of this conversation, feel free just to put them in the comments below. I do keep a running list of all of the questions, and I'd like to do more of these question and answer type episodes in the future. They're just a nice change of pace, you know? So without further ado, our first question. How do you honor Anna and Clara's memory that brings you comfort? I really appreciate this question because it's something that's been beneficial for me to think through and work through. And it's still a work in progress. I think the loss is still quite recent, 2 years for Anna and 1 for Clara. So I guess we're still working out how we'll honor their memory. I think one thing that's really precious to me and that we do a really good job of is just we never put up walls. I know I've heard stories of people when they lose a loved one, the pain is just too much for them, and they put up walls and barriers. They kind of put everything from that person off in a room or a box, and they don't ever want to look at it or think about it or talk about it. And I mean, maybe that's fine for them. Everyone's journey is different. But for me, a way I honor their memory is by being willing to carry it through my daily life and activities still, to not sever myself from it because it's painful. But as we walk through life, me and my family together, and we remember the girls in real time. Just last night, a funny little memory came about. We were looking for the TV remote, and I remember that Clara used to call it a hemote. She couldn't say remote when she was little, and she would say, "I've got the hemote." And we just laughed. And there's lots of little things like that that happen, or we'll be watching a movie, or we'll hear a song and say, "Oh, they really love that song, and remember they used to do this when that song was on." And so rather than putting a dam up in our hearts against all the memories and all of the pain, but also the joy they bring, we just kind of let that constantly flow. And I think it's really refreshing and comforting for me and for our family that we've allowed ourselves to have that. And yeah, so I think that that's been really good. Just willing to engage with whatever comes in each moment and in each day and be blessed from the memory of that. I'm still kind of working through how to deal with the physical objects. And I have actually kind of been working out a series of videos that are to come, dealing with that specific topic, dealing with the physical objects, the memories. I consider myself to be like somewhere in the minimalist type camp. At least I want to be. I want to carry these memories with me forever, but at the same time, I don't want to carry all of this stuff with me forever. And right now, I have a big, easy place to store it, but that may not always be the case. And there is an emotional weight to that as well. So anyways, as far as honoring their memory, like through physical things, I definitely think that there's some of that there. And there's a few like things that we have. We have some friends that gave us money and they wanted us to like get something special for the girls. So we had these teddy bears made out of their clothes, and those are special. I have a really special thing that will be coming eventually. We are having rings made with the girls' ashes. So there are companies where you can take your cremation ashes, and they have special machines that uses the ashes as a source of carbon, and the machines compress them for a long time. It takes like a year to grow the diamond. I'm having 2 rings made, one for Clara and one for Anna, but they're going to stack. And Anna's is already done. It's a pink diamond, and Clara's will be a blue diamond, and it is growing right now. And so when I go through the process of designing those rings and getting them, I'll show you all of that later. But I think that's one way to honor their memory, and it's also like a symbol that keeps me grounded. The symbol of, these ashes turning into something beautiful, like diamonds, or this beautiful eternal stone. And it's just a reminder of the vibrant and shining life that they have now, and that it came from this earthly place of dust that we're all eventually destined to. So that ring will also bring me comfort. I don't know if comfort's the right word for that, but it's just, I like it. It's like a piece of them, but it's also like a symbol to me. To me, it kind of like embodies like the stance I've chosen to take in relating to their loss. Okay, the next question is, how long have you been a believer? So I have been a believer almost as long as I can remember. I trusted the Lord as my Savior when I was about 6 years old. I don't have any written record of it, but I do remember it in great detail. It was a Sunday morning, and I was all dressed up and ready to go to church, but the rest of my family wasn't ready yet. And so I was sitting on a rocking glider thing on my front porch, and there was something stirring within me. I'd been raised in the church. Like, I'd heard Sunday school teachers, I'd heard my parents, I'd heard people talk about Jesus and that he came to save us and that we're sinners and that we all need him. And so I think this was the point in history where Christ caught my heart, and the Holy Spirit worked in me and just really showed me my need. Like, I understood it. I think that was the place where the understanding met like the need for me, and I just got it. Like, I think with salvation, like there's this time where you just get it and you're like, I need that. Like, it's imperative. Like, it can't wait a second longer. It must happen. And I felt that Christ drawing me to himself when I was sitting in that rocker as that little girl. And I remember just feeling this unsettledness, but then kind of like surrendering and asking for forgiveness for my sins and asking Jesus to be a part of my life, and just really acknowledging who he is and really understanding who he is. And then I remember I like went and rode on my Cabbage Patch big wheel that was in the front yard up and down the street. And then I came back, and I think I just went in and told my parents after that, like, hey, I got saved. I don't quite remember that part as much, but I do remember just sitting there and having that moment with him and just knowing that that was it, it's so interesting when we look back on our personal histories, and then we kind of see how our lives progress, how every little detail like has significance. And I think it was significant for me that I did receive the Lord at such a young age. Because my walk with him started so early. His presence was this like constant, abiding, just source of strength and peace for me. But more so, it let me know that that level and depth of understanding is possible for young children. I know many young children that have accepted Christ, and I know that may be like not shocking at all for some of you, and some of you may be like, oh my goodness, like, wow, is that possible? Do they really get it? Like, how can someone so young understand that? And the thing is, they can. Like, I did, my children did. The gospel is really actually quite simple. I think because I had that experience, I just knew that it was possible. And so I just wove the gospel through our conversations with my children when they were little. And I never pressed them or whatever, but one by one, they each had their stories and their moments where they were ready, and I was there with them, and I was sensitive to that. I was expectant of that in a way. And I think it's a great gift and mercy of the Lord that He allowed that for me, Him knowing what the future would hold, that I had the peace of my children being held eternally in His hand. So I'm 43 now, so whatever 43 minus 6 is, like 30, 37 years. And that's not to say that I didn't have times of waywardness and straying within that time. But for the most part, yes, I've walked with the Lord for a long time now. Do you feel at any time during the journey with your children you would get angry at God, or did your faith just deepen and grow as the years passed? So that one's a little trickier. I never remember it being like deeply, deeply angry, but I do think there was a time I was angry with God, and it was early on. It was really before anything started with Clara. It was probably during the time when Anna was having her anoxic reflex seizures. And, as far as we were concerned at that time and told, those were an isolated event. Nothing else had even happened yet. So how could they have had anything to do with anything? But that was a very stressful, trying time, and it was really hard. It was a really dark time, and I do think I was angry with God at that time, and then kind of grew out of that and made my peace with it. And then to some degree, when the things started with Clara and the loss of the eyesight and the surgeries, kind of wrestling with it, going through a little bit of, why God, and probably a little bit of like being kind of PO'd and angry with God. But it was never a stance I stood in and took ownership of. I think sometimes when hard things happen, people just they turn their back to God in anger and refuse to let Him in. They're like, I'm done with you. I'm mad at you. That's it. Rather than I'm mad at you. I don't understand this, but I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to just keep walking with you through this because you're God, And so for me, it was a stance, something more like that. It kind of turned from anger to more of a questioning His goodness, which I also resolved through a night of struggling with Him after one of Clara's many hospitalizations. And then that question of, is He still good? Yes. Then that turned into more of, well, you're still good, but do you love me? Because why would you allow this to happen to me and mine? And then going through that question, and of course it was, yes, He still loves me. He hasn't forgotten me. He still loves my children. But there is this great mystery to everything, to life and our faith, and we can't understand it all. And I think being able to be in that place of not knowing, to embrace the mystery, but also to be held with the peace and the love of God, that is where the strength is. That is where the place we need to be is to get through these things. And but yeah, it's like these emotions just gradually turn one into the other, and when you look back, you see this kind of amazing journey you've been on and how much you've learned from it. So I guess that's kind of the answer as far as that goes. What have you learned in your grief that would be helpful for those of us going through experiences that are bringing about the same emotion? Yeah, so what have I learned through my grief experience that could help you with yours? Yeah, first I just want to start by saying that hard is hard. My story is extreme. I had extreme circumstances, extreme loss, but that's not to say that other circumstances of loss don't feel as deeply desperate and jarring, that they aren't also very, very hard. One experience I've had many, many times throughout this whole thing is having friends come to me or people from church, and they might want to tell me something or share something that's going on in their lives with me. And they start out with this disclaimer, and they'll say, well, this isn't anything like what you've been through. You've been through so much more, but, and I just want to say there's no need for disclaimers here. We are all given suffering and trials and hardship. And pain is pain, hard is hard. I remember times before I went through this huge thing with my family and with the loss of two children. I remember like normal hard struggles, and I remember how hard they were, and I remember how tortured my soul felt, and I remember how much I struggled and anger I had, or relational just angst. I remember hard before this storm of hard hit me. And so I put them all in the same category. And I think that we deal with them in the same way, but in different degrees. Okay, so what have I learned that might be helpful for someone else going through grief of this sort or any sort? Okay, I've thought of 3 Ps actually. I've talked about some of these in some of my other videos before, but I would say like priorities, perspective, and presence. And I'll explain those in a little more detail. Priorities. When you are going through grief, it's usually the result of having been through something difficult or having lost something significant that puts you in an emotional state of sadness, of loss, of grief. And so when you're in this place, you have to prioritize the emotional things going on take up a significant amount of physical and emotional energy, and you won't be able to do as much as you did or handle as much as you did for a season because you only have so much energy, you only have so much resources and time. And if some of those are being channeled into processing the grief, there's less there for you to maintain your other like habits and systems, if that makes sense. For example, during all of this, my physical health really suffered. I gained a lot of weight. I just didn't have as healthy of habits, even though I'd always had like very regular healthy habits. Like they just waned under the pressure of what I was going through. And slowly over this long time, they really deteriorated. And I saw it happening. And sometimes I'd have like a good several months or a year and really try. But then these things that were out of my control would just overtake my good intentions again. And I just didn't have the resolve and the energy to take care of myself as well as I had been accustomed to. So in addition to all of the trauma and the loss, there's also this like loss of like being able to be kind to yourself in a way. At least for me, because my situation was like being a caretaker. So when you're in that situation where your own reserves are really being used up, and I mean, I would say like, sleep as much as you can, like take walks, do all that stuff. I mean, we all know what we're supposed to do to take care of ourselves, but here's the cold hard truth. sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't do all that stuff. Sometimes you can't go get your gray hairs touched up or get your hair trimmed or have time to shop online and get new makeup and like look cute. I looked so rough for so many years and I know it and I wasn't happy about it. I'm really happy to not be looking quite so rough anymore, to be able to be taking steps towards regaining those things. So you just have to set your priorities. And I think our hearts, our priorities over our hips, if that makes any sense. So there is a kindness you can take to yourself on an inside level, even if you can't maintain the outside. And it's not going to last forever. And I think it's much easier to get back in control of the physical habits than maybe the spiritual ones or those. So I would say guard your heart over your hips and be kind to yourself. Shop for shoes, not pants. When nothing fit, and I'm just like, I'm gonna wear yoga pants for 4 years because I don't care. And then I even had to buy a size bigger of yoga pants, and I'm like, wow, this is like, it's really bad when you outgrow yoga pants. It's really bad. But you know what? You could go try shoes on, and shoes just fit and look good. So I'm like, okay, we're focusing on shoes. So I think just knowing that your heart's a priority and be nice to yourself and that this will pass, that it may feel like forever. It may be a really, really long time. Mine was a really long time. It may not be a long time. It may just be a quick season. But there will be a time again. And that's not to say just let everything go, like do as much as you can, but we have our limits. And if you can't, it's okay. It's okay. So perspective is something I kind of like to talk about. I know in some of my other videos I've talked about feeling like I'm up on a tall mountain, like looking out over all of it. And I think when you're in a state of grief, it's easy to pity yourself or to shut out the world and not see what else is going on. And when we're only looking inwards, we lose our perspective. And so I think it's good to take the like habit of kind of every once in a while making ourselves aware that even in our like dark place we're in right now, whatever it is, there's always going to be someone that looks like they're doing better, and there's always going to be someone who has it worse than we do. And to even think of times in your life where you've had it worse than you do now, and maybe you're in the worst part of your life right now and you've never had it worse than you have now. I get that. That's where I was. But someday the part you're in now will be the part that was the worst and you'll be out of that. So I like to think of, yeah, like you can think of a time in your own life or just like the perspective of somebody else, like another scenario, you know, other humans are in right now. That's worse than where you are. Like I consider like any child who's stuck in a human trafficking type situation, that is a worse situation than what we were in. My book, that is torturous, hell on earth, and yeah, it breaks my heart. So there's a lot of worst case situations, and no matter how bad your situation is, there's probably something worse going on. So there's a place in between worst case and where you are, even though it's bad, where you can find something to be thankful about. So there's that. And then there's the looking at the people that are doing better, or times in your life where things were better and happier and you wish they were there. And wishing for that can like just make us even more unhappy where we are. And so but it's not bad to look at that. Like sometimes you can say, oh, look how good it was, like how much we had, I'm thankful for that, even though I'm here now, like, look at what I have had. And so in between the space of I'm not where I want to be, there's more I want that I don't have yet, there's a space to be thankful in between those places because you have had it or you have the hope of still having it. So in your place of suffering, it can go in both directions, but both directions kind of point you back to thankfulness and towards like just that, just how everything's so temporary here. At least that's how I think of it. That's kind of the perspective I like to have. And then another aspect to this whole perspective element is just the bigness of God's plan, and it's even outside of our dimensions of space and time, and we don't get it. And this is just like this boot camp training ground, interesting, like living artwork that we're playing out in, and we get to have like communion and communication with God in these times, and he's teaching us and he's preparing us and he's giving us glimpses of glory and what's to come. And if we can just hold our temporal circumstances in the light of something so much bigger and more glorious than what's here now, at least for me, that helps. And that's kind of how I've thought during all of this. Like that gets us into like presence, like the presence of God. And sometimes when you're in like a really tight, tough place of grief and sorrow, you forget that the presence of God is also there. But like his presence is everywhere. Like there's nowhere we can go and not be with his presence. Like he went to the darkest places when Jesus was on the cross. He entered into those places and felt the weight of the sin that happens in every place, the suffering and death that happens, like the deepest suffering that we can experience. He went to those places and he's been to heaven, to glory on high. So from the highest to the lowest, from the most glorious to the most profane, like there is no place that his presence isn't and cannot rescue us from. So when we're in these places on this spectrum of feeling the grief and feeling like we need the rescue, it's there. It's there. We just have to recognize that it is there and that it connects us to the glory. And we're not exempt from this pain. We're stuck in it and it sucks. But we have this beautiful vision, this beautiful faith that is a reality that tethers and ties us to the love of God, to something that's so much larger than we are. And so I can get going on these kind of themes and stuff and just really take a deep dive. And that's not what I'm trying to do here. So, okay. So what was that? Like priority, perspective, and presence. That was it. I'm going to stop there. Thank you for listening. I've had fun doing this. I feel like it's a more relaxed kind of video to do. Maybe it's certainly going to be easier to edit and put out there. So I think it might be a nice change of pace to do these Q&A style videos from time to time. So go ahead, and any questions that you have that come up from watching this video, or if you've had them watching other videos and just didn't realize you could ask me questions, well, you can. So go ahead and put them in the comments, and I will keep a record of them, and I will bring them up, in some of these sessions as we go on. Also, I just want to ask you if you will please subscribe. If you have been watching these and you aren't subscribed yet, it is free. It doesn't cost you anything. All you have to do is just hit that button, and it's going to make a big difference for me on YouTube. I hope. I'm just wanting to kind of get to the next level on YouTube where maybe some more options start opening up for me with that. That would be really great. So please subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. So I have been working on the next video, which was the one that was supposed to come out today, but it isn't finished yet. And so that's where I was like, ooh, let's do a Q&A for today. I think I've kind of settled into the groove of deciding to release probably one video per week. There might be some weeks where I'm able to release two. I had a bunch made in advance when I started and was able to release them, but I haven't been able to keep up with the pace of making them to release more than one a week. I'm kind of leaning towards a video every Friday and then sometimes one on Mondays if I have something I'm really rolling with and want to put them out quicker than that. So that's kind of going to be the new mode of operation around here. So I hope everyone enjoys their weekend. Thanks for listening and put your questions below. Okay, bye.